I see leaders of the EFF and everybody responding to Donald Trump. I don't have time for nonsense.
But on the South African side, as you know, we are running the world's biggest HIV counseling and testing campaign. At 5.5 million people are on ARVs. No other country comes anywhere near that. The total amount spent in this campaign is 44.4 billion rand. And PEPFAR contributes 17% of it. The rest is mostly our own fiscals and some other funders, like Global Fund.
President Donald Trump says that South Africa's leadership is doing some terrible things after threatening to cut off all future funding to South Africa over its land expropriation policies. Now, in a post on his media platform Truth Social, Trump said that South Africa was confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. Now, he also called it a massive human rights violation and warned that the United States would not stand for it.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make it.
This Donald Trump, I mean, he's threatening South Africa based on something about a certain class of people are being treated badly. He doesn't say who are these classes of people. You can make your own assumptions. The land is being confiscated. I don't know if we've reported recently on some land in this country being confiscated. By who? Who's confiscating land? Which land? Given to who? Who's got this land now that's been confiscated? I mean, Donald Trump, I don't know what mission he's on, but clearly South Africa is not on a favorite footing with him. I wonder what information he's got. I mean, and I wonder how our president is going to respond to this, because it looks like Donald Trump is on a mission to really antagonize the rest of the world, because he wants to.
With this standing threat that, because you passed an Exploration Act, therefore Trump would withhold funding to South Africa. And they said, let's not mobilize Africa. Let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality, they take our minerals, but say we're withdrawing funding. No, we have minerals in the continent. And therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars. But we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent. But if, as a continent, we are frightened, we fear everything, we are going to collapse, and will collapse with minerals at our doorstep. So, my appeal is that Africa is the world's richest mining jurisdiction. And that issue is an issue that we must internalize as a continent, use it to our advantage.
We want to make it categorically clear to the President of the USA that we are going to expropriate land without compensation and pursue legislative measures to do so, and no threat will stop us.
You are basically asking Donald Trump to target ANC leaders. What does that mean for our country? Because this is the leaders of our country you're talking about.
Yes, it means when you push through destructive policies that are going to harm South Africa and regular South Africans, you should face consequences for it. We want the international role players to target with sanctions South African politicians that push through evil and destructive policies, not to punish the citizens of this country. And that has always been AfriForum's stance. As I said, we have the receipts to prove it. You can go through all of our stances on this issue over the years. It's always been punish the politicians that are seeking to push through policy for their own personal agenda and their party's own agenda, rather than for the good of the country, and that will bring about the change that's necessary in South Africa.
With this standing threat that, because you passed an Exploration Act, Therefore, Trump will withhold funding to South Africa. And I said, let's not immobilize Africa. Let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals. But the reality, they take our minerals, but say why we're withdrawing funding. No, we have minerals in the continent. And therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars, but we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent. But if as a continent we are frightened, we fear everything, we are going to collapse and will collapse with minerals at our doorstep. So my appeal is that Africa is the world's richest mining jurisdiction. And that issue is an issue that we must internalize as a continent, use it to our advantage.
So PEPFAR is something that, we don't need in South Africa. We don't need it. In fact, PEPFAR, what it's supposed is us giving antiretroviral drugs to people from neighboring countries because they're able to access them here easier than they're able to access them in their own countries. In fact, there's a lot of people that come to South Africa just for their ARVs. They come in monthly just to stock up their ARVs in and out. So if we can control and make sure that our citizens are prioritized and make sure that no foreigner gets their drugs while a South African is unable to access their drugs, right, as a priority. I'm not saying that we should cut out our neighbors because we also need to be humane in the way we deal with this virus. This virus was injected into people. We've seen the videos.
So you said that you were going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South Africa?
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
And on the Fed.
This issue that Donald Trump fears so much, we offer this question of the land. I don't know what Donald Trump has to do with South African land because he's never been here. And he must keep his America, we will keep our South Africa. That is what he must do. South Africa is our land. South Africa belongs to all the people who live here in South Africa. It does not belong to Donald Trump. He can keep his America. And Ene is even worse. He's even worse. When I meet him, I will tell him. I will say, you, Donald Trump, you are even worse because your forebears came to America. They found the native, the indigenous Americans. They wiped them out. They killed nearly all of them. Rine, we are living as a nation, and black and white, we are going to find solutions for our land question. So Donald Trump must leave us alone. He must leave us alone, Maori. When we were facing apartheid, when we were facing oppression, he was not here. He did not fight side by side with us. And we were able, on our own, yes, with support of progressive forces in the world, to resolve the apartheid question. As far as I recall, Donald Trump was not around the negotiating table when we negotiated the end of apartheid. So stick around there in the White House. We will do our business here, and we will find solutions for our problem. So stay out of our issues, and we will not get involved in your issues in America. You have your own problems. Leave us alone.
And we start with this story. US President Donald Trump says that South Africa's leadership is doing some terrible things after threatening to cut off all future funding to South Africa over its land expropriation policies. Now, in a post on his media platform Truth Social, Trump said that South Africa was confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. Now, he also called it a massive human rights violation and warned that the United States would not stand for it.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
Now, for more on this, we speak to our U.S. correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who joins us virtually from New York. Sherwin, good morning. South Africa now in the sights of President Trump. He's accused South Africa of human rights violations in the context of expropriation of land and also threatening all future funding until an investigation establishes the facts. For us sitting here in South Africa, it sounds a bit incredulous.
Welcome to the Trump vortex, Sakina. Essentially, South Africa shouldn't feel too special by being mentioned here in a Truth Social post because you are in very good company. Ask the Canadians, ask the Mexicans, ask the Panamanians, ask the European Union. I mean, you mention a country where the foe or friend of the United States, Donald Trump, is fighting tough since his inauguration. And South Africa now has been castigated in this Truth Social post. And of course, the subsequent remarks that he's made on television. South Africa is confiscating land, he says, and treating certain classes of people very badly. It's a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't even want to mention. A massive human rights violation. At a minimum, it's happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Also, I will be cutting all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of the situation is completed. And remember, Sakina, this kind of language comes in a broader context in terms of Republican members of the House of Representatives and the Senate that have identified South Africa. They have South Africa in their sights. There was legislation passed in the last Congress seeking to review the bilateral relationship between the United States and South Africa based on certain South African foreign policy positions, in particular Russia, in particular Israel, the relationship with Israel as it pertains to the Palestinian cause, the war in Gaza, the efforts at the ICJ. So, very much a concern right now is to watch the Rand, watch how the Rand responds here, but also additional pressure in terms of the broader picture stuff, in terms of South Africa's readmission into AGOA, which is up for a renewal in October or September this year. So there is a lot at play. And don't forget, we recently spoke to South Africa's ambassador to Washington, Ibrahim Rasool, and he conceded, Sakina, that this was one of the most difficult assignments that he's taken on behalf of South Africa in his career. And this, I think, this post from Donald Trump today and the subsequent remarks very much speak to what the ambassador was saying in that conversation.
So, Sherwin, what does this mean practically? Given what Donald Trump has said, does this mean that the funding, for example, is immediately stopped, or is this just a signal of what is to come?
What we know in terms of what happens in moments like this is that there's a lot of confusion. And so a number of his aides and, the people that have to go and implement these things now need to find out what he meant, what was the catalytic moment for, why South Africa now. And so I think there are a lot of people behind the scenes now seeking to get a better understanding of this. I've already texted South Africa's ambassador to say, is there some early reaction here? But I'm sure DIRCO is still digesting this information. I'm sure they weren't expecting to be starting their Monday this way. So I think there'll be a few hours or a few days to really, come to terms with what the president meant here and whether it will, of course, implement policy moving forward, right? We saw the suspension through executive order of all foreign aid. And then, of course, it had implications for humanitarian organizations, healthcare organizations in South Africa in relation to PEPFAR and the distribution of ARVs. And we saw them provide a waiver for that. So would it be something like that? I will tell you this. In 2018, when Donald Trump was last last president, Sakina, he also tweeted August 22nd, 2018, I've asked my Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to closely study South Africa, the land and farm seizures and expropriations, and the large-scale killing of farmers. Quote, South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. He obviously had just watched something on Fox News and tweeted about it, and not very much came from that. So that was that's our early example. Let's see how this plays out. But Donald Trump is fighting with everybody. South Africa is certainly not unique in that regard.
Sure, and thanks so much. And before I let you go, Wouter Kellerman, we just got news. In fact, you just alerted us to his Grammy win there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was planning to spend my Sunday evening, watching the Grammys. So sidebar, Kellerman wins again. I think this was his 5th nomination. The win is for Treveni, the album Treveni, in the Best New Age Ambient or Chart Album category. I'll tell you, South Africans, at least once a year, Black Coffee comes to mind, Ladysmith Black Mambazo, and so many others that have done so well. Tyler most recently at the Grammys. So well done to Wouter Kellerman for flying South Africa's flag in Los Angeles tonight.
And then just before I let you go, of course, Elon Musk and, his influence on what is currently happening with the new Trump administration and that sort of impact on South Africa, Sherwin. Given what we have now just heard, how much of an influence is he on how South Africa is viewed in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you have this former South African that very much has the ear of the United States president. And a week ago, he was also tweeting in relation to South Africa on the 24th of January. He retweeted a post that was referencing a graph that the Free Market Foundation from South Africa had posted. And the tweet says it's a post on a graph showing that there are, quote, Sakina, quote, there are more race laws in place in South Africa today than there were under apartheid. On the 23rd of January, Elon Musk posted something. He was retweeting a tweet that said South African farmers are in grave danger now that the expropriation bill has been signed into law by Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, of course. Land can now be confiscated with no compensation if it is deemed to be for public purpose or in the public interest. South Africa steadily becomes communist. This is a tweet that Elon Musk was retweeting or reposting on X. And so it kind of gives you a sense of where Trump might have been informed about what he now knows to be true, but not necessarily true in relation to South Africa. And one imagines that Elon Musk might have had some role to play here.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Sherwin Bryce. Please get some sleep. And Sherwin, of course, our correspondent out there in New York. And that's the latest coming through from the United States of America. You heard about Wouter Kellerman's win there. And Beyonce has also won the Grammy Award for Best Country Album for a Cowboy Carter. This at a ceremony that served as a love letter to host city Los Angeles following the devastating wildfires that scarred a hub of the music business.
Very good afternoon to you, ma'am.
Afternoon, Oli, and afternoon to the viewers.
Thank you indeed for making time for us. How does the ANC view this? The introduction is quite clear. You blame AfriForum. What, in your view, has caused the president of a powerful country such as the US to listen to a lobby group?
I think part of what we are dealing with here is the extent of misinformation that has been done against South Africa, particularly around the progressive laws that we have taken. It is a demonstration also of the need for the United States of America to strengthen their own diplomatic relations with ourselves, and where there are issues to be engaged upon, as Comrade President Cyril Ramaphosa has raised, there has to be mutual respect in terms of communication. The lobby groups are a danger to any stability, as we have seen the mess that AfriForum has done. We hope that President Donald Trump's advisors would actually advise. We know it's still early hours of the day in the United States now. We hope that they would advise him and make him to understand, firstly, the Constitution of South Africa that gives guarantees, the Expropriation Act that also does not talk about haphazard land grab, but that gives certainty that it is primarily for good public use and for development. Fourthly, that on the issues of funding in terms of health and health interventions. It constitutes 17% of the total spent, as Comrade Aaron has spoken about. However, it is also something that can't just be a decision, but we do respect the sovereignty of that country. We do respect the fact that they are considering these issues. However, we believe that the situation could have been handled better.
AfriForum does appear to appreciate the larger impact of this action if indeed it were to happen. And they're saying that not everybody in South Africa should be punished. If anything, the President of the United States must target ANC leaders. It would appear that they are asking almost for targeted sanctions against the leaders of the ANC. How does that sit with you? How
That's
do you interpret
very racist of them, very reactionary of them, very unpatriotic. We have a government that is led by the African National Congress. Our progressive policies actually are meant for uniting South Africans, for promoting equality, for ensuring that there's inclusivity. They are now exposed about their commitment and determination for racial discrimination and self-enrichment in terms of how they see these opportunities, because they know they stand to benefit if there is no expropriation for future public development and public use. They know, as a matter of fact, that if we get affected in terms of the non-funding of some of the programs such as HIV and AIDS, they stand to benefit through the private sector, and our own constituencies would be the ones that are going to be disadvantaged. But we'll have to also go back to the drawing board as a nation, even as a government, to say, if we have this kind of a situation, what then happens? If there's going to be a targeted act against individual leaders of the ANC and individual leaders of government, let it come. Let's see what it actually, how far it will actually go, because we all stand to benefit if there's mutual respect of sovereignty, of the constitutions and the rule of law. But we all stand to lose, because America itself stands to benefit in some of the programs that they themselves are sponsoring, including others beyond the health interventions and the undermining of the PEPFAR arrangements that we have always honored and been able to show that there is an impact. Nobody is indebted to the United States of America.
The interesting comment comes from the Democratic Alliance, who are GNU partners in this new government, and they are saying, while it may not be perfect, the Expropriation Act, but there is a misconception that has been I guess, understood by President Trump, and that's why they support President Ramaphosa having a conversation with President Trump. How do you view the DA's stance on it?
I think there's honesty in what they are raising, because the very Expropriation Act does give guarantee that the interventions don't actually take the form that AfriForum is actually alleging, and that we appreciate, because that's very patriotic. That is not even just about GNU, but it's in the good spirit of the South African Constitution and the laws of this country. It is so embarrassing also that you can find then such a supposed to be advanced democracy and its institutions that only through AfriForum there can then be a tweet that goes out and recklessly causes this kind of uncertainty and anxiety. But AfriForum must be known for what they are: racist, unpatriotic, very selfish, resisting towards doing away with discrimination and development. And one of the key things that led to wars of resistance in this country, which is the land issue.
The other party here, Action SA, we're hoping to speak to its leader, Herman Mashaba. He seems to hold a very, very strong stance that AfriForum should possibly be charged with treason, but we'll have to understand exactly where he comes from with that particular angle. But at the same time, I was listening to him earlier, he does suggest that, look, there's no doubt that there has been mismanagement of not just the economy, but the very many policies that the ANC has produced. How do you feel about the stance of the Action SA that says, yes, while there has been bad governance, if we could sum it up that way, from the ANC, AfriForum must actually be charged with treason for what they're doing?
We do acknowledge that there's been challenges over the past 30 years, but there's been a lot of good that has happened, including policies and implementation of policies. What has also been quite important is to appreciate that the Land Act, the NHI, the Bella Act were all signed under a GNU. We now have different forms of relations, even at a provincial and a local level, that also give everyone an opportunity to interact. As for what must happen to AfriForum, the immediate position that we hold is that they must be known for who they are. They are racists. They are people who cannot be trusted. They are not patriots. As to what law of this country have they violated, I don't think that it is still, it is timelessly for the ANC to then say they must be charged with treason. And by the way, I doubt if in our laws now we still have a law that can just be implemented through somebody just making an announcement. The days of Jimmy Kruger are gone. So there has to be processes to check, and then there must be enforcement of that law that helps to protect the sovereignty of our country.
I have very little time with you. Two quick questions before I let you go. Let me start with the statement you made earlier, that it's quite embarrassing for an advanced democracy to seem to take action based on a whim.
On gossip.
How do you think relations or communication can improve between South Africa and the United States at government level, government to government?
We must all continue to manage our relationships on the basis of the diplomatic relations that we have. We have an ambassador there. We have our own president who's available to be contacted. We've got our own minister. We have binational relations signed through agreements with the United States of America. Let's go back, and I think it will be wiser for that supposed to be advanced democracy to appreciate that we must all be active on the basis of rules. If we're not going to have a rule-based relationship, we'll have this chaos.
Final question. The land restoration bill that was promised by the ANC. This is something different to expropriation. Temeka Ngcukaitobi, the advocate, sat there and said, where is it? Is it still in the offing?
The restoration bill is very important because it also deals with indigenous communities. It deals with the issues of culture. It deals with the issues of the future even of provinces and how we put up systems of government for development in our country. It is something that must also go into the national dialogue that South Africa is going to be having, as it has been pronounced by the president. It has to continue being a topic, a subject that we all must now come and talk about it. Now that also these others have shown that we are carrying a burden as the majority of South Africans to forever correct those that are committed to perpetual separate development.
I have to squeeze this one in, please. Try and be short if you can. The leader of the EFF today suggesting that indeed South Africa's soldiers are held hostage by the M23 in DRC. And he even goes further to say there are suggestions now that the bodies of the deceased soldiers are possibly decomposing. That's the word he used. What is taking so long? What's the ANC's understanding of the repatriation process?
Firstly, we must continue to convey our condolences to the families, as well as wish those that have been injured well. This is an operation that is not based on hearsay or gossip or utterances coming from faceless people. I don't know who's the source of the leader of the EFF. Where we are, we believe that the situation is under control. Where we are as the ANC, we have resolved that let's leave this process to government. As government has already released the names, it means the bodies are known. once they are handed over to the South African National Defence Force and the families, we can then be able to move on. We do not want to be involved in all these, hearsays, because he's not the commander-in-chief. He's not the general. Parliament has hardly received, because at least if they were briefed by Parliament, Parliament has hardly received any briefing. Up until, as a member of Parliament, at least gets a report from the minister, maybe we can begin to listen to him.
Nomvula Mokonyane, the leader of the African National Congress, joining us in studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
US President Donald Trump is threatening to cut all future funding to South Africa. He claims certain people are treated very badly and that the country is confiscating land. Trump is possibly referring to the recently signed Expropriation Act, but without proof, he claims there are massive human rights violations in South Africa and wants a full investigation. The US president told Fox News that bad things are happening in South Africa and that the leadership is doing terrible things. Trump, however, didn't mention what terrible things he's referring to.
When Donald Trump won on the 6th of November last year, I said he is going to dominate the global agenda and he will dominate the relationship with South Africa. Everything that we thought would be the framework that we've worked with the United States and others across the country, across the globe, is going to be upended. And he's absolutely going to do that. I don't think this is the first time that Donald Trump is going to pronounce himself on South Africa. I've said that our relationship and our case of genocide against Israel, for example, and what happened in its engagement of the war against Gaza and Hamas, is going to be a big issue. I think this is just the beginning with the United States. That relationship is going to dominate in South Africa, is going to dominate the way we deal with the world. And I think by November, when the G20 summit takes place in Johannesburg, there is going to be a lot that will have happened. So I see this as just the beginning. I think that that relationship you speak about with AGOA, the fact that already U.S. aid has been cut off, is being cut off by the United States government, the fact that 20% of South Africans who benefit from HIV AIDS medication that comes from PEPFAR, the program started 20 years ago by George W. Bush, will now face a new reality. All these things are going to come through. The United States is going to, in my view, upend South Africa in many ways. You can see with the currency, the rand is taking a beating on just other issues, the tariff issue and so forth. So AGOA will be another one, Braden. And I think we South Africans have to prepare ourselves for the fact that we will be talking to, with, against, alongside the United States for quite a while.
The total number of people is 271,000 people, 271,606 to be exact. Those are the people on the ground every day who are fighting HIV and AIDS. Now, out of that number, 256,452 are funded by us as South Africa. And I want to repeat the numbers because it's very important to understand. We have got an army of 271,000 people, 606, on the ground in the 27 districts fighting HIV and AIDS. 256,452 are funded by us as South Africa from our own fiscus. That leaves us with 15,145 people. Those are the ones who will be affected by whatever withdrawal is there. Now, how is the funding conducted? 76% of the funding is from South Africa. 76% of the funding. 74% by the government, fiscus, and 2% by the private sector. That includes medical aid. All the medical aids in the country are contributing 2% to the fight against HIV/AIDS. Otherwise, the rest is government. Now, obviously, as you can see, that leaves us with a gap, and that gap is filled by Global Fund, which gives 7%, and PEPFAR, which gives 17%. So when you add Global Fund and the government of South Africa, or the South African, either government and private sector, when you add them, you realize that is 83%. So PEPFAR remain with the 17%. That's where our problems are. Now, we are buying ARVs on our own with 10% from Global Fund, which is not affected by this. I'm sure you are aware. Global Fund is an international organization in Geneva. We are buying on our own. So our biggest problem will be the salaries and the operational costs of those people that I've just mentioned. That's what we are trying to look at with Treasury.
I see leaders of the EFF and everybody responding to Donald Trump. I don't have time for nonsense.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Jones. Why Not TV? Please subscribe. Bye for now till we meet again next time. Subscribe, please. Don't forget to like and to comment. Thank you very much. Dr. Jones, Why Not TV. Mutsonga wa Shiviri from Limpopo. Goodbye till we meet again next time. Subscribe.